Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Changing the Climate, a show where we talk about the changing world around us and how we can make it better. Brought to you by Climate Change Realty. All right, hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Changing the Climate. Of course, I am very lucky and honored to have my guest, Mr. David Takahashi. That's you.
Hello.
Hey, man, how's it going? Of course,
Good.
always getting the show started, getting a little bit of background, who you are, how you got to be doing what you're doing at the moment.
Okay. Well, it's a kind of a long story, but basically, I had a father-in-law who blew the whistle on global warming. I didn't believe what he was telling me at the time in the early 90s. He shared with me the predictions of increasing carbon dioxide concentrations in the atmosphere. And then in the year 2010, our home in 4 Mile Canyon burned to the ground. And the next year there were debris flows from the fire, which buried my neighbors up in 4 Mile Canyon. And then 3 years, every year after that was the next biggest fire in Colorado history. And then 3 years later, we had a standing storm dump a year's worth of rain in 3 days, which in my neighborhood up in 4 Mile completely reconfigured the geography. And at that point, we had already decided that rebuilding up in 4 Mile was not in the cards. That was right after the bubble burst and the money was tight, and people were pretty unscrupulous because they were endangered. Their businesses were endangered. So there was a lot of this going on, and so after the flood, we decided, well, what are we going to do about this? It dawned on me that what my late, by then, father-in-law had been telling me was actually coming true. And what were we to do about it? So we decided, let's see how far we can take lightening our carbon footprint on our home. And it turns out if you do the math, the amount of carbon each of us are putting into the atmosphere on a daily basis
As Americans.
is 100 pounds.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've backpacked with 50 pounds on your back.
It's a little heavy.
But yeah, I mean, you look at 100 pounds and, we're talking Marines. So we said, well, okay, so what is the holding capacity of the Earth? It's about 20 pounds.
Per
so
person.
The Earth, if we put out 20, the Earth with its oceans
Times 7 billion people, 20 pounds per person.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Which is a little weird because it seems like the more people, the less per person, but that's a bad argument. But anyway, so we essentially went from 100 pounds per person, me and my wife, down to 12.
Nice.
So it's doable. You got to pay attention. And this is our home is a 60-year-old home, modest, but 60 years old. So anyone can do it, is what I'm trying to say.
Beyond a doubt. Cool.
So then that's not the end of the story. So here we are in Boulder, and there are 40,000 residences. We figured we've shown you can do it. We know that it's important to do. One of the barriers has been removed, which is no one's done it. So let's get started. And of course, we ended up with 0. So we said, oh, not so good.
0 people following in your footsteps, you mean?
Right.
Uh-oh.
So then we said, well, that's interesting. What if we look at doing this to houses of worship? So you get the big house going, right? And all the people under that roof suddenly go, oh, this feels better. And oh, we have more money for our programming. And oh, why didn't we do this sooner? And oh, we could do this at home. And oh, I could do this where I work. 2 years of organizing, and we got nowhere. So
wow.
That's where we are today. We keep trying, and
yeah, let's dig into that a little bit, because
yeah,
before you had this big personal experience, you were one of the zeros as well. You had no interest in your carbon footprint. So when did you kind of, how come you didn't think, oh, just the biggest fire ever in history, 3 years in a row, that's just a coincidence, these things happen. What made you like flip the switch to be like, hold on, maybe my father-in-law actually was thinking about something correctly?
I can tell you the exact moment.
Love it.
The exact moment is around about 12:30 on September 10th, 2010, as I stood in my front yard in 4 Mile Canyon and watched a major wildfire unfold around me, and realized I was watching flames shooting hundreds of yards into the air in the wind and landing, and trees exploding and houses suddenly torching, and the sound of breaking stuff and explosions and just total chaos.
Powerful.
And at that moment, this was like living and going to hell.
Yeah.
Okay. And this was
being destroyed.
The sky is orange. It's like the monk, the scream. It's like the system is falling up. Yeah. The system is falling apart around me. What are you going to do about it?
Right.
So that was the moment.
Yeah.
And the rest is like evidence that's supporting evidence just started piling up. But that was the moment.
Well, why were you skeptical before that? Why did it take such a profound personal experience to get you to believe in climate?
Well, I grew up, I came up through biochemistry, and I know what a part per million is.
Yep.
Okay. So 400 part per million is like 40 cents in $1,000. This is like, and when you start talking about the effects, sea level rise, bleaching of coral, droughts, fires, increased and more frequent damaging hurricane. I mean, the whole calamity on 40 cents and $1,000. I just didn't buy it.
Right.
Such a small thing having such a large effect.
Well, I think of a great analogy as like food coloring. Like if you drop a drop of food coloring into a glass of water, it'll turn the whole thing red. I think we've proven, or we've seen from the last year, that a little tiny molecule can change the whole world. So I think we shouldn't underestimate the little guy or the little thing to have a big, huge impact. I guess what I want to ask you is, how do we get other people to be profoundly impacted and want to and realize what's going on with the environment and takes strong action like you have, and how we're going to talk about all the stuff you've done to your house and all the work that you have been accomplishing over the last decade. But is it going to take a wildfire to burn down everyone's house for them to realize, hey, we should probably do something about the climate?
It's interesting when we first started, evangelizing. I would ask the audience, do you have any personal or familial or close friend who have been directly affected by climate disruption? And almost nobody would raise their hand. Nobody's house had burned down, whatever. Well, a couple years ago, we were able to show a movie called From Paris to Pittsburgh up at Chautauqua. As we led into the movie, there were like, I don't know, 50, 60 people in the audience. And we asked, I asked, well, how many of you have, direct or very close contacts who have been directly affected by climate disruption? And almost everybody raised their hand. And I think what's happening, Ethan, is I think the idea of we are affecting climate has hit Main Street.
I agree.
Okay, so we have the IEA, International Energy Association, just came out with, they have been oil and gas supporters forever. And they recently came out with the roadmap to net zero energy in 2050 and the prescriptions for getting there. And in it, they include 2.5% of our existing building stock will get to net zero energy per year. And if we do that, that will help us reach net zero carbon by 2050. So cool. It's hitting the Main Street. So yeah, that's all I can say.
Yeah. Well said, man. That's really cool. I just wanted to ask you, before we get into talking about how to green our own homes, I wanted to ask your opinion about this idea of like the 7th generation principle, which you had in like your bio on Boulder.earth. So beyond just caring for, nobody wants to see their own house burned down. Why is it important to kind of worry about future generations, and how much profound will the impact be on our decisions that we make today for people maybe 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 generations down the line? So if you just want to talk about that a little bit and how that is important to you.
Yeah, I think, okay. So one thing that you've reminded me is that we need to acknowledge that we are right now operating on Arapaho and Cheyenne and Ute tribal lands.
Correct.
Okay. So having said that, without trying to act like a cultural appropriator, the indigenous people have tremendous gifts to offer us. And one of the gifts that they offer us is the ability to consider our actions as they affect coming generations. And they, the Iroquois, it's interesting, the Iroquois, when Benjamin Franklin was casting about for models of governance for this new nation, there was this thing called the Iroquois Confederacy that had been operating around them forever. And Franklin actually went to visit the Iroquois Confederacy and got this whole idea of democracy through what they had been proven was a sustainable model. So part of that sustainable model is looking forward and saying, my actions actually are going to affect people that will come onto our land 200 years from now.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So if you think about what is going on around us right now, Ethan, it's very interesting. We kind of have this industrial complex model, take, make, toss,
Quarterly goals.
which is kind of, we're starting to pay that price now.
Mm-hmm.
And it's possible that, we need to respectfully put some things into hospice and let them go. And at the same time, we need to be looking forward and saying, you know what, we're midwifing this thing that is trying to come into existence. We don't know exactly what it is, but we see it stirring. And so this idea of the seventh generation is kind of a switch from looking back to looking forward, because what has preceded us doesn't seem to be working so well.
Sure.
So it's not a very good model. So maybe the model is actually in the future. So when we start to talk about this thing called equity, okay, so we hear a lot of talk about equity, and what equity is trying to do is to bring into focus populations which have been overlooked and which do not have a voice and don't necessarily have representation. If you think about future generations, they are underserved, they are underrepresented, and they have no voice.
That's deep, man.
So from an equity standpoint, we actually need to bring the future generations into the picture. So that's my spiel.
I loved that spiel. That was awesome. I'm going to think about that more as we continue on here.
Yeah,
but let's get into talking about.
Continue on, man.
We got a lot of stuff to cover today. Let's talk about something you're a big expert on, which is obviously making your house more sustainable, because you guys are actually a net positive home now, which means that you are giving energy back to the grid. Is that right?
Over the year. Not every day, not every hour, but over the year.
So let's talk about, what is a nanogrid?
Okay. So here's the deal. The deal is the cards are stacked. We cannot actually share our energy with our neighbors. Actually, we are about to be able to, but when we started, we were not able to. Okay.
Why is that?
So a nanogrid says that the energy that I create will be used on my property. And when and I'm gathering that from sunlight hitting my roof, and when the sun goes down, or the snow falls deeply, or the clouds cover the sun, whatever, we're taking that energy and storing it in batteries, and in those times of no production, we're drawing from the batteries.
Sure.
And when the sun is shining, the batteries are full, we take that surplus energy and give it to the grid.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what you do in a nanogrid is that's what you do. If it were a microgrid, okay, nano means very small, micro means a little bit bigger.
Okay.
Okay, so in a microgrid, what you're able to do is share it between buildings.
Mm-hmm.
So in my mind, I'm looking forward to a free market in energy where each of us can be producing energy on our roofs. And if our neighbors are covered with trees, we can share that energy with them on a free market.
Right. So
Okay.
sell it to them, right?
At a negotiated price.
Sure.
Okay. Which would be less than what they're paying the utility, which doesn't make the utility very happy.
Right.
Okay. So a nanogrid is you're kind of inward facing, and any sharing you do is through the grid.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So yeah, baked into that is there's a couple things you got to be thinking about. Well, first you got to be thinking about, let's use the least amount of energy that we can.
Efficiency. That's key. Number one.
The second is, let's conserve whatever we have to take as long as we possibly can. Okay. And then finally, let's produce and store whatever energy we can harvest on our land.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So through those three things, you come up with getting your carbon footprint to like 12 pounds, which is doable.
It's awesome.
And I'd like to say what drove this whole thing is the idea that we can create abundance on this earth with the 7 billion people we have,
mm-hmm.
and honor planetary limitations. We can do those two things. And
I agree with you.
that's what trying to get our footprint down under that was all about. Showing that here we are, we're spending less money, we're actually more comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So, and we all can do it.
Yeah, and I think I like that you said energy efficiency as number one. I think that is probably one of the biggest points, because using things more efficiently just always makes more sense. Like, there's some things we do that don't make too much sense to me. Like, I don't want to get too much off on a tangent because you and I both aren't experts on like gray water, but just the idea that we bathe, flush toilets, and drink all of the same water, like this amazing resource that's limited. That's like, it's just obviously not the most efficient way we could be living. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah. Let's not. I'm going to let you control things, because I could go off. Yeah.
What do you think is the best way to like scale this these nanogrids, or even like a microgrid where the neighborhoods are all connected to the same thing? Because obviously you said there's vested interests with the utility who don't want this to happen.
Right.
So how as we've talked about, you've had problems like getting, you've been talking about that zero of getting people to do it. So how can we get this movement going and going quickly? What do you think?
Okay, so It's interesting you asked that because I was just, okay, I just looked at an article where one of the big military camps, what are they called? Military, whatever they are, bases.
Bases, yeah.
Yeah, a military base has decided to go with microgrids for resilience.
Long term, yeah.
Okay, so meaning when when the disruptions happen, like what is happening with Elsa right now, um, a hurricane knocking out power, or power getting knocked out, whatever, that these um, essential mission critical facilities really need to be resilient. And currently the way they get to that resilience is they have these big diesel generators.
Wow.
Right? But it turns out, Ethan, that in a emergency, you can't find diesel.
Right.
Right? So it's not as, I mean, when everything's good, it's it's a good plan, but everything isn't good. Okay,
Not
so
always.
they're going to microgrids. Okay, so to answer your question, I think that question was around here in Boulder.
Sure.
We take the fire stations, we take the churches, we take the YMCA, we take those places that are first and second response mission critical facilities, and we make them into microgrids,
Right.
doing what we've done here. Okay, and then once that happens, and people say, "What I've been waiting for, Ethan, is I've been waiting for that cold winter night when the grid goes down because
God.
snow is on the whatever, trees come, to have my house lit up and my neighbor's house is dark,
You better invite them over.
and I will invite and they'll go, how the hell did you do this? But
Well,
lucky for Excel, that has not happened.
not yet. Well, now let's talk about how you did it. I want it because it was like a 4-year process, starting from thinking about how to do it to actually putting into action to now being fully net
Mm-hmm.
positive, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about
Mm-hmm.
like the key steps and what you've learned from it and what you want to teach other
Okay,
people.
so the first thing that happened, I have to give credit to the city of Boulder, and I have to give credit to Brett Concairn, who at a climate symposium mentioned that the city of Boulder was offering um, consulting services to people that wanted to do this.
Yes.
So through the city of Boulder, we were able to find the consultants that had already been through this and could guide us every step of the way.
Amazing.
Yeah, just and and we need more of those people. I think, as we look at economic recovery, having people that can provide those services and get people recovering in a energy smart way would be really great. But so that was the first step. So we found our consultant, and the first thing the consultant said is talk to this person about an energy audit.
Okay.
Okay, so the energy audit, a energy auditor shows up at your house and actually gives you a roadmap for what you need to do to get your house to energy efficient.
Cool.
Okay. And kind of a timeline and costs. Okay. And it's kind of like a cafeteria menu. If you don't want dessert, you just skip it, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you don't want the salad, you just go. So we had the roadmap. That was in 2015.
Mm-hmm.
And we said, okay, well, let's start with the lowest hanging fruit. And we got through that happens to be insulation and sealing.
Of course.
And
Not the
we
walls,
got
the
through,
ceiling.
yeah,
Oh,
SEALING.
insulation and ceiling. Right.
Yeah.
I'm a realtor,
Um,
whatever.
yeah. Yeah, you have the ceiling and then you have the ceiling. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we made it through that, and we said, okay, that was good. And the whole time we're kind of watching this thing called the home energy. What is it? HERS
I thought it was like index.
rating system. The home
Home
energy rating
energy
system. So
index.
when we started, okay, this is a 1954 ranch in Martin Acres. When we started, we were at a HERS home energy rating system score of 190.
Which means what exactly?
Which means if a new home built to code scores 100.
Yeah.
190 means we are twice as bad as a
Inefficient.
new home built to code.
And as I understand it, there's a new law in Boulder now that all homes have to be net zero, starting in 2021, I believe.
I think there's still a
Like a
square
wedge.
footage. Yeah,
Oh,
it's
limitation.
it's 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 like
3,000,
35,000, I think.
3,000, I think, or
Oh,
3,500.
okay.
Wouldn't be 35. Oh, you mean the lot or the size of the home? Either way,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
index
Oh,
tells
you're
you
right. I
the
think it's
efficiency.
3,000.
I think it
Okay,
is, yeah.
so and I hope that is also remodels, but probably not. But where were we? So okay, so we're watching our HERS score as we're doing all this work, and 0 is net zero.
0 is net zero?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so you have 100 is a new home built to code, and 0 is your net carbon emissions are 0.
And ideally, we want every house to get as close to that as possible as time goes on.
Yeah, start working it. So there's this other idea that what is measured improves.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if you watch your weight, it will help you lose weight.
Yeah.
Right? Because you see, oh, look,
Smash those goals.
yeah, look, it's working. Let's do some more,
Right.
So that is,
Good old
what is
dopamine.
going on. So we start at 190, we do the low hanging fruit,
Mm-hmm.
and we say, well, what next? Okay, so what was next was, we were lucky, Ethan. Our home, when we bought our replacement home in 2012, after arm wrestling with the insurance company over our fire, we inherited a home with a 25-year-old furnace.
Okay.
Forced air furnace, and the seller actually agreed to buy us a 3-year insurance policy on the furnace.
Okay.
Okay. So the reason I say this is, everything in our home that burns fossil fuels will be replaced at some point. And even a brand new, the one that lasts, I think the longest are the furnaces. And even with a brand new furnace by 2050, that will be replaced.
Mm-hmm.
And that we don't need to replace everything right now, but as things go bad,
Yeah.
it would be really good to replace them. So the next thing so we had the home kind of holding on to energy. So now we're like, okay, so we're efficient in that whatever we use, we don't waste.
Mm-hmm.
So now let's work on the using part,
Right.
the consumption part. And so the next thing that came up was that furnace. So the efficiency of a furnace is about 1, if you're lucky. Every unit of energy you put in, you get a unit of energy coming out.
Of you, and then a
Burning
furnace
fossil fuels.
burning gas. Okay.
Yeah. That's as good as it gets. So the consultant said, there's this thing called heat pumps, which is, how does a box in your kitchen turn room temperature air into a freezer and a refrigerator? Well, the way it does this is
Freon?
through a heat pump.
Oh.
Yeah. So you've got the energy of phase change already operating in your kitchen as your refrigerator. You take that technology and say, well, what if we used it to that phase change to provide heat in the winter and cooling in the summer?
Okay.
That same technology. And the efficiency of heat pumps is around 3, meaning you put in a unit of energy and you get 3 back.
Huh.
Why wouldn't you do this?
It's
Well,
triply efficient.
one of the reasons is as a early adopter, first of all, we had trouble finding people that would do this, but as an early adopter, you're paying a premium.
Certainly.
Yeah, which it's all coming down. I mean, you can go down to Home Depot and you can buy a portable air source heat pump for $400.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so even a renter can do this.
Yeah.
Okay, so what I'm saying is, as adoption increases, the price goes down.
So, yeah, of
Okay,
course.
so the barriers of entry are dropping drastically, and as we know, during the polar vortex in Texas, the spot price for natural gas was around $9,000 per megawatt hour, which reduces down to about $9 per kilowatt hour. And your bill from our utility is around 12 cents per kilowatt hour. And the ripple effects of that thing that happened in Texas is that our local utility is asking for $600 million to be reimbursed by its ratepayers over the next 3 years.
In Colorado or in
In
Texas?
Colorado.
Because of what
It
happened in
is
Texas?
before the Public Utilities Commission as we speak.
Hmm.
Yeah. So, and that's just the polar vortex in February. And
Yeah.
Ethan, we know these things. I mean, we have the heat wave happening right now in the
Yeah, for sure.
Northwest. That's it's either too hot or too cold. It all means that spot price
Problems.
goes up. And
But
and so
how does the heat pump relate to like your refrigerator?
it's using the same technology, but it's doing two directions. So your refrigerator takes room temperature air and makes it cold.
Yep.
Okay. A heat pump takes outside air when it's cold and makes it hot.
And it's
That's the
electric,
flip. And
not
in the
gas powered.
summer, it takes hot air and makes it cold.
But how does some sort of science in the
The
in the pump?
science is there's a phase change. It's called a refrigerant.
Mm-hmm.
And your refrigerator has it, and an air source heat pump has it.
That's why I said Freon, right? That's what it's called. That's what it uses.
It's a refrigerant. Freon is illegal.
Oh,
Yeah. I
come
have
on,
a. By the
Dad.
way, I have a water. My water heat. We'll get there, but the water heater refrigerant is actually carbon dioxide.
Okay,
That is really cool.
it's plentiful. That's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So, okay, where were we again?
Heat pumps. Sounds like we're probably around like 2017. I'm guessing you're slowly moving things out of the
Yeah,
house.
yeah, 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 yeah. So
And
we get the heat taken care of. We get rid of this 25-year-old furnace that was on its last legs, luckily. Um, and so we're down to the water heater.
mm-hmm.
Okay, so we bought the house again in 2012. It had an electric range stove. It had an electric washer dryer. You know, the roadmap said your heat and heat basically air heat and water heat are the things you're going to have to tackle.
Yep.
So we get the heat done and we're happy, and we're looking at the water and we're saying that's the last thing between us being where we are today and getting rid of the gas meter.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't know, we could wait this out, but let's just go ahead. So we look into how we're going to, but this is a 1,000 square foot ranch.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of space to put in a. We're trying to use the existing footprint,
Yeah. Sure.
and yeah, and go carbon free, and it was pretty difficult at the time, but our consultant actually came up with a solution.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we have is we have a like that compressor on the back of your refrigerator is small enough that it can be in the back of the refrigerator, but to
Mm-hmm.
heat or cool a house or to heat and cool water for a house, the compressor part is outside.
Okay.
Okay, so that's what we do, and we found a solution. We put it in, and yeah, in January of 2018, we phone up Excel and say, "Would you please remove the gas meter? We don't want it on our property."
Woohoo.
Yeah, that was a really wonderful day,
Yeah.
and so that kind of was a milestone. And later in the program, we can get into the ramifications of that, but
Sure.
that was big. So then what happens? Backing up a little bit before then, home built in 1954. The windows, many of them had gotten off kilter, didn't actually really work, had watered, all sorts of things. So
Sure.
we looked at what it would cost to replace them.
Mm-hmm.
And it turned out to be not bad at all. And there are a lot of options. And we went with kind of what we had in the home are double hung windows.
Mm-hmm.
The top would go down and the bottom would go up, and all that. And we looked at replacing them with double hung windows, and they're a little bit more expensive. So for the price of going to, the other thing about double hung is you need screens on both. You need full screens.
Sure.
So the cost goes up. So what we ended up doing is single hung, the lower only, only a half panel screen, and going with only one movable part. We were able to get triple pane for less than the double pane, double hung.
I hear you.
Right? So that seemed like a no-brainer. So we did that. And
when did these solar panels come into play?
Okay, so that was a lead up to. So now what happens is in 2018 we have no more gas. Okay, but what happens now is the utility, and this just changed. The utility says, well, we don't want you producing a surplus.
Mm-hmm.
So what you need to do is tell us how much energy, electricity you used in the previous year, and we will grant you that amount to put on your roof.
Okay.
Plus a little bit. And
Sure.
that recently changed from 120 to 200%.
Mm-hmm.
So right now, if you wanted to put solar on your roof and you had a year's electricity, you would be able to ask for double that amount.
Sure.
Okay, so we had just electrified, so we didn't have a year.
Mm-hmm.
So we had to wait for 2019.
I see.
In order to have enough records to ask to like get on our hands and knees and ask for 120%. And so we spent that looking at the roof, what we could get up there. We're in a 60-year-old subdivision.
Yep.
And we have some mature trees all around us. And the house was never set up, and the installer estimators. I mean, I'd go down to Home Depot, and the Sunrun, people be down there, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and I'd give them my address, and they'd go, not gonna happen. And so it took us a while to find a installer who really believed in what we were trying to do and
There's a
would
lot
work
of them.
with us.
There's a lot of installers. I get
Yeah.
calls from people like trying to do that stuff all the time.
Yeah. And so we found one, and they advised us very, very well, and listened to what we wanted. So we're a little bit different. When you okay, so after the year, we actually got as much solar on the roof as we could get. And we still need a little bit more in order to go with EVs.
Mm-hmm.
Because I have a problem charging an EV off the grid when the grid is mostly coal and natural gas.
Yeah, I hear that,
Okay.
man.
So that remains to happen, but
That makes sense, though.
yeah, but
That's something people don't talk about a lot.
yeah, well, the other thing they don't talk about is what you do with that solar that's on your roof.
Mm-hmm.
So there's this idea of self-consumption, which means I want priority. I want that power coming off my roof to be powering my home.
Mm-hmm.
And if the wake up call, Ethan, was watching news clips of the hurricanes moving through Alabama, Mississippi, Florida, South Carolina, Georgia, and seeing people interviewed in front of their dark houses
Yep.
talking about the power's off
Mm-hmm.
when there's solar panels on their roofs,
Mm.
right? So a solar system that is a solar energy system that is counting on the grid has some vulnerabilities. And
Beyond a
that
doubt.
is when the grid goes down, you're as dark as everybody else. So we really wanted to get to the point where the grid goes down, we stay up.
Your own nanogrid.
That's it. And so there's this little switch. So what the concern with producing your own energy is, well, the utility is going to have people out fixing the lines,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't want power moving through those lines
Right.
when they're fixing them. So you need a switch on your house that says, oops, grid down, flip the switch, nothing from here goes there, nothing
Right.
crosses.
Absolutely.
And that's called islanding.
Oh.
Okay. So so our intention was not to save money. Our intention was to use the energy from the sunlight hitting our roof
Right.
and avoiding that kind of dirty, tainted.
I get that.
Yeah.
Well,
And
cool,
and
man.
and this company we found understood that. So they really worked with us, and it's
Yeah.
yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you for sharing all that. It's really good for people to know the whole experience of going through all that. I'm definitely curious about how we can incentivize people who are motivated by money to make those changes as well. But instead of talking to you about that, I want to ask you how you think someone who is motivated either by financial incentive or by the desire to be completely net zero but doesn't have a lot of time, because it sounds like this is a long process. You've thought through it. You put a lot of work in. You've talked to a lot of different corporations about how to get this all done. How can someone who doesn't have a lot of time make these changes in their life?
Right. So what they do is what we did, which is find a trusted consultant
Mm-hmm.
who
Okay.
guides them,
Yeah.
right? And
It
they're
still sounded
around.
very laborious and intensive on your end, like you made it sound
Yeah.
like there was a lot of stuff that you had to consider.
Yeah. And Well, there's a lot of stuff I didn't have to consider because I had the consultants.
Right on.
Yeah, and it was collaborative. So I would say those people are around, and that should not be a barrier. And if people are motivated, they should follow up with you, and you can follow up with me. But
Very
they're
cool.
around.
I like
They're
that.
definitely around.
I'm
Yeah,
around as well. Happy to
yeah,
help people out.
yeah.
Cool. Fair enough. All right, so we're actually kind of running out of time here. So I just wanted to talk about you mentioned some sort of ramifications from the decision that you made to go net zero. Do you want to talk about that before we kind of close out here?
The ramifications of going net zero. Yeah, I mean, the ramifications are, basically waking up in the morning and going, is the sun shining?
Mm-hmm.
And if
Well,
it
we live in
is,
Boulder, so pretty
yeah,
pretty common for it to be.
yeah, yeah. So, another ramification is, um, even in our darkest months, December and January, we ran a surplus.
Cool.
Okay, February, March, and April, not so much. But the rest of the year, starting May, June, July, all the way through the next February, we're running surplus. And it's really, you look at our yearly production, and it's almost like night and day, where the winter, it pretty low, but the summer very high production. So we didn't ask to save money, but you end up saving money.
Very
Um,
cool.
and the other ramification is we are independent of that cost of fossil fuel,
Mm-hmm. Which is variable.
which we know it's going like this,
Right.
right? Um, so I think the another ramification is, we know it can be done,
Mm-hmm.
and
That's cool.
we know that anyone can do it. Um,
Cool.
and it's about choices, and yeah,
That's America.
and yeah, and it's about creating abundance while honoring planetary limitations, and just
It's a generation.
that sense of lightness,
Mm-hmm.
of not having 100 pounds on our backs.
Deep.
And there are other things, it's like I'm trying to get my insurance company to acknowledge that I'm off of natural gas, and therefore I'm less of a risk, and therefore I should pay less, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm working on getting incentives for people doing this work so that, it actually, I think that if we're not planning to sell our house, but if we were planning to sell our house with the right buyer, the fact that we are net zero would make a big difference.
I
I
can tell
mean,
you from experience that it would.
even in a loose market, I think it would make a difference to the right buyer. But
Yeah.
I think that should be any buyer,
Mm-hmm.
and get to the point where we can really start to incentivize rather than penalize.
Beyond a doubt. Well,
Yeah,
appreciate you for sharing today, man. I got just a couple open-ended questions at the end here,
sure.
relating to what kind you were just talking about. What would a resilient United States look like to you? What are some of the main points that you would want, main changes in the way people think or the way we behave? How would that look?
Okay, a resilient, it would look like community.
Mm-hmm.
It would look like we're all in this together. Um, if I have, there's model in nature that I use for resilience, and it's this aspen forest in Utah that has been around for 80,000 years.
Amazing.
And what it does is it senses as a big organism where the drought is, and it knows where the water is, and it starts moving water from where it is to where it needs to be. And nutrients, it does the same thing. So if nutrients are in scarcity over here and there's an abundance over here, then that nutrient starts to move. So that to me is the mesh, that resilience. And nature is showing us that we can, she's done it for 80 fucking thousand years.
Yeah, for real, man.
Yeah.
Grounded out.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like
so that's what a resilience would look like.
Ecosystem. I love it. It reminds me of like Avatar. Like everything's connected. And it totally makes sense. We have real models to show it in nature, like you said, 80,000 fucking years. That's no joke.
I celebrated what is it? Declaration of Interdependence on the 4th of July. It was Interdependence Day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we live in such an individualistic society in this country. I think we're going to have to change if we want to survive. We'll have to work together, because this whole everyone's on their own, everyone's one seed and needs to grow by themselves, I just don't think is going to last. I mean, we barely made it 280 years. So, I mean, it was fun. It's been fun, but we can do better. We can do. I
think it was one of the beauties of COVID.
Yeah. It's not cool, but being by yourself, it's not fun. Yeah. Cool, man. All right. Well, it's been really awesome having you on. Last question is just, what advice do you have for young people who want to be a solution to like a more livable biosphere, climate, or just like system in general?
My advice is prepare for taking this over. We're about to pass you the baton, and that I have worked with you, and that you are so prepared. I am in awe of the generation that is coming along. Fridays for Future, the Sunrise. I mean, these are people that have so much going for them. It is awe-inspiring. So my advice to the young people is actually advice to the old people, which is we got to get out of their way.
Yeah.
We got to get out of their way, because they've got everything they need to make this happen, and they will.
Amen, David.
Yeah.
Amen. It's been a pleasure, man. Thanks so much for coming on the show. It's always great talking to you. You're more than welcome to come on again at any time. And we have a bunch of other things we could have talked about, but you'll have to come back. Again. Let's do it again, man. It's been a pleasure. Thanks everyone so much for watching. And David, really, thanks for coming on, man. I loved hearing what you had to say.
Yeah. Go out there and make some news, man.
You got it. We're out there. All right, everyone. Thanks for listening, and have a fantastic weekend as always. Take it easy. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Changing the Climate, the official podcast of Climate Change Realty. If you are very passionate about these issues and you know anyone considering buying or selling a home anywhere in the USA, then please visit ccrboulder.com today.